This was the golden age of exploration. Mallory watched with the rest of the world as explorers from America, Norway, and Britain raced first to the North and then the South Pole. In 1912, Captain Scott, the legendary British adventurer, died in the attempt to be the first to the South Pole. Mallory was among those inspired by the tragedy.
Britain is at the waning of the empire at this time. It's looking for ways to reinvigorate itself. And so attention inevitably turns to Everest as the final possibility, the third pole.
Surveyors had calculated that Everest was the highest mountain in the world, but no Westerner had ever been within 40 miles. Mallory became obsessed by a mountain he'd never even seen.
Everest is the highest mountain in the world. No man has reached its summit. Its existence is a challenge to man's desire to conquer the universe.
Mallory wasn't just enthralled with Everest. He had also fallen in love with 21-year-old Ruth Turner. Right from the start, they wrote each other adoring letters.
My darling, I'm longing for you. I would kiss your lips and look into your eyes, and you all near me and with me, strong and glorious and loving and laughing.
I cannot find words that would be sure to convey what I feel about you. What I really want is to know you and to love you more and more. Dearest and most beloved, your loving Ruth.
George and my grandmother Ruth fell madly in love in 1914. They were both idealists, really seeing kindred spirits in each other. They were married 3 days before the start of World War I.
Mallory enlisted and came face to face with death once more, fighting in the Somme, the bloodiest battle known to man.
There is no reckoning with death here. Life presents itself very much to me as a gift.
Mallory had witnessed the mass slaughter of the First World War. His fellow soldiers, some of them 6 feet away, killed by German shelling. He knew how fragile life was, and knowing this, he wanted to live it to the fullest. He wanted the ultimate challenge, and that, in the 20s, was Mount Everest.
Once the war was over, the Royal Geographical Society in London planned the first ever expedition to Everest. They needed Mallory for his supreme climbing skills. He needed their backing to realize his obsession. When Mallory undertook that first expedition in 1921, he had to approach Everest through Tibet from the north. The Nepalese refused to allow access to the easier south side, used when Everest was first officially climbed in 1953. After an 8-week journey, Mallory finally set eyes on the mountain that had haunted him for so long.
Like the wildest creation of a dream, Everest, a rugged giant, a prodigious white fang, a colossal rock plastered with snow. From the mountaineer's point of view, no more appalling sight could be imagined.
When he first saw Everest, he describes it really almost as an adversary. It's very beautiful, but also ugly or frightful, like an ogre.
There were no maps. No one knew the terrain there. In this first trip, the trip of 1921, it was imperative that the team find the route that would lead them to the summit.
For months, Mallory led the search, but the route to the summit eluded him. Finally, late in August, he found what he was looking for. An enormous glacial valley that snaked for miles around the other giant peaks, towards the very foot of Everest.
My dearest Ruth, we have found our way to the great mountain.
At the end of the valley was a wall of snow and ice 1,000 feet high. It led up to a crest that Mallory named the North Col. And then on to the top of the world.
We have established our way to the summit for anyone who cares to try the highest adventure.
But the heavy snow that comes with the monsoon each summer quickly made climbing impossible. They had to head home. But within 6 months, Mallory was back again. This time with film cameras to show Everest to the world. He climbed higher than anyone else before him. But late in the season, as Mallory led porters up the mountain, disaster struck.
A great snowfall had come. They got to a delicate place on this massive ice slope and triggered an avalanche.
My dearest Ruth, 7 brave men killed, and I am to blame. It has happened forever, and I can do nothing to make it good.
After the avalanche, and when George returned to Europe, he really had no wish to go back to Everest. He just wanted to get away from the deprivation and the danger, and also the memories of that avalanche. He had been away for a very long period, over 2 successive years. He wanted to get back to his wife and his family.
They had 3 children. My mother was the second daughter of George Mallory. And at this point, I think he was really starting to think about wanting to be home more, to be with Ruth more, and to address himself to raising the kids.
But a new expedition was being planned. And Mallory desperately wanted to be part of it, against Ruth's wishes.
I love you, and you love me, and that ought to be happiness enough for a lifetime. But I do want you. We want to live together all the time, and share thoughts and joys and sorrows. And we can't apart as we can together.
I am having a horrible time on a tightrope. It would be an awful tug going away instead of settling down here with Ruth. But it would look rather grim to see others, without me, conquering the summit.
Mallory clearly loved Ruth very dearly. She was his sweet, domestic, beloved partner who represented all that was appealing about home, family, the flatlands of Cambridge, sea level. But Everest represented all that was exciting, adventurous, visionary, mystical. His personality was pulled between those two poles.
Early in 1923, the crisis came to a head when Mallory sailed to America to speak about his Everest adventures. He was the star turn at the Explorers Club in New York.
I can just imagine the audience on the edge of their seats as Mallory told them about the biting wind, the lack of appetite, the fierce cold.
A New York Times journalist asked the question, "Why climb Everest?" Mallory gave his legendary reply.
Because it's there.
Three words that have probably become more famous than Mallory himself suggest a sort of fatalism bubbling away in Mallory. The mountain remains, it's unclimbed, and so the quest remains. And he is the man who is locked into this almost fairy tale relationship with the mountain. He's been twice, and he must go back the third time.
I think the idea that someone else would build on his progress and get to the summit on his shoulders was quite difficult for him to accept. It was, after all, his route and his mountain. It is actually a surprisingly selfish thing for someone like Mallory to experience, but then mountaineers all do have this kind of element of selfishness deep down.
Aged 38, this was Mallory's last chance to conquer the mountain. Conrad Anker will follow Mallory's footsteps, leading his own expedition to Everest and the second step. During his climb, Conrad plans to test clothes and boots modeled on those he found on Mallory's body.
Using this replica clothing, I'm gonna have this chance to go back and see what it was like for Mallory to try climbing Everest in 1924.
But like Mallory, Conrad is torn between his passion for Everest and his love for his family.
My family's anxious about this trip. I'm going to Everest. It's a deadly mountain. What's it worth? Is it worth leaving your kids behind? Why are you going to this mountain? Are you going to be safe? You know I love you. And I can see there, as I was trying to rationalize it to my wife and children, that it's a safe thing and it's a fine thing to go on Everest and it's a noble thing, that these were the same answers that Mallory had for Ruth.